we'll get started. Yeah, we've got a good group. Excellent. Glad to see you all here. Thanks for coming. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Valerie Rochon. I'm the President and Chief Collaborator for the Chamber Collaborative of Greater Portsmouth. My co-host today is our fearless leader in Portsmouth Economic Development, Nancy Carmer, who's the Economic Development Manager, and I'm so pleased that she can make the time to join us today as my co-host. Thank you, Nancy. She's going to help us unpack all of this data that's going to be shared with us. We also have Jen Stevens, our Communications Manager, and Ben Van Camp, our VP of Membership, on the call, who are in support, and Ben is driving the bus as usual. We had the chance to invite economic development teams from around the Seacoast and the execs of the 6 chambers that make up our collaborative Seacoast Chamber Alliance to join us. And so welcome to our friends from Exeter, Dover, Somersworth, Rochester, Hampton, and the Regional Economic Development Center in Raymond. So we're just pretty excited to have you all here with us. Also in the audience, I believe we have State Representative David Muse and Portsmouth City Councilors Petra Huda and Cliff Lazenby. We're glad to have you with us. We have some members of the EDC, Alan Gold. I think Bob was trying to join us, but might not be able to. And we have Paul Brand from the Seacoast Media Group. So we do have some media joining us today. Welcome, Paul. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. You will all be on mute, so please use the chat function to ask questions. If something happens with the Zoom meeting, Ben will close it down immediately and we will reschedule. And remember that all Chamber Chat live events are recorded and they are posted on our website and social media sometime next week. So anybody who's missing us today can take a look at us and get the information from Sean and Lynn and Liz later. So Sean Mckinley from the UNH Survey Center and Liz Gray from the Small Business Development Center are with us today. Nancy's going to tell you more about them in a moment. First, I'm going to catch up on a little bit of chamber news. I always remind you to visit portsmouthnh.com for the complete list of hotels, restaurants, shops, attractions that are open and operating, and we want you to shop local, visit local, support local, go see who's open and go visit them. You can also find all of the adopted guidelines from the state at covidguidance.nh.gov. Quick update on the Citizens Response Task Force. 3 subcommittees, public realm on which I serve. We are short-term focusing on getting restaurants out on the streets, making sure that curb cuts and access is still available for all of our other businesses. Long-term, we're now focused on winter and how to bring people safely indoors for our business community. The Bridge Street Pop-Up New Hampshire group is going to open next Saturday, not tomorrow as they had hoped, but they want to make sure that everything is working well before they open the doors, so to speak. And the new health subcommittee is working on face coverings, supporting the city ordinance mask mandate, and Stephanie Secord, who's sitting on that subcommittee, has developed a COVID-19 dashboard. And if you go to the cityofportsmouth.com and you click on COVID-19, you can find that dashboard and has some really great information, the data and the science on what's happening in New Hampshire and in our surrounding states to do with the pandemic. Reminder that on the financial aid front, Gopher Office yesterday announced that the New Hampshire Emergency Healthcare System Relief Fund applications are now open for a 3rd round of funding for all healthcare and long-term care providers, regardless of prior eligibility or grant awards. The application period is from yesterday through August 13th. If you fall in those categories, you might want to visit the Gopher site. The New Hampshire GAP Fund, the General Assistance and Preservation Fund, is still open for applications. That's emergency financial relief to New Hampshire businesses and nonprofits impacted by the pandemic who have not been able to access support from other existing state and federal programs. They're open July 21st to August 4th, so you need to get that in before next week. I'm not sure if I told you about the BEA, the Business and Economic Affairs Department and Chamber Partnership. The BEA has allocated through the Gopher Funds $2 million for the 7 regions of New Hampshire to collaborate on programs during the COVID recovery period. And those funds will be used for economic recovery in the general areas of economic development, workforce acquisition and retention, tourism, marketing, and health initiatives. And I know that each of our chamber regions are going to be working out to work hand in glove with our economic development partners. So be aware that we're going to be reaching out. We've identified from some of our members that jobs and getting workforce is still an issue. Ben and Courtney Richings, who's the director of the CTE program at the Portsmouth High School, have received a grant to continue that good work that they're doing, the School to Work program. So trying to line up your your steady stream of employees with the school program and our business members. And, you know, the opioid crisis, do you remember that was when that was our priority a little while ago? And we set up the Portsmouth Community Coordinated Response to Substance Misuse Steering Committee that went on a little bit of a hiatus after our December report out to the City Council, but we are now back in full force, trying to identify, we've identified the 5 priority areas and back at work to collaborate on those solutions. And obviously the Chamber's interest is in getting people back to work. I'm going to now turn it over to Nancy Carmer, who's going to introduce our speakers who have so much great information to share with us today. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you, Valerie, and I think it's time to thank the Chamber in general for this chat series that you've been working on throughout this pandemic. It's been great to see the resources that you've put in front of our business community, and I know from the city's perspective, we are grateful for that. But now to the matter at hand, it's my pleasure to thank and introduce 2 panelists that we're very fortunate to snag from what I can attest are their very busy days, and without whose work we would be less prepared to confront the days and the months ahead in recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic and in charting the path ahead. I'll start out by introducing Liz, who will make remarks first, and then when she's finished, I'll introduce her colleague, Sean. So Liz has an impressive bio here that I will read. Liz Gregg joined the New Hampshire Small Business Development Center as State Director in July 2018. Prior to this, she served as Director of Entrepreneurship at the New Hampshire Business Finance Authority. She established Live Free and Start, an initiative to make New Hampshire an even better place for innovative companies to be able to start, grow, and succeed. She held the position of Economic Development Business Services Manager at the New Hampshire Department of Resources and Economic Development and has extensive experience within the political community of New Hampshire. Additionally, she worked for more than 10 years in various capacities in the office of Governors Shaheen, Lynch, Hassan, and as legislative aide in the New Hampshire Senate. She serves on the UNH Manchester Advisory Board and on the boards of the directors of the UNH Alumni Association, New Hampshire Tech Alliance, where she's the chair of the Government Affairs Committee. She earned her master's in public administration from UNH, as well as her Bachelor of Science, cum laude, with dual majors in environmental conservation and international affairs. I've been lucky to work with Liz over the years, and she's put all of that experience and education to great work. So Liz, take it away.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. It's my pleasure to be here. I love getting to work with Nancy and Valerie and Sean, of course, through the Survey Center, and looking forward to getting to know more of you over the next few weeks and months ahead. As Nancy said, I've been on board over at the SBDC for the last 2 years, but none of us had any idea what was coming at the beginning of this year. And as you can imagine, things have been a little bit on the busy side for SBDC, but we are thrilled that we've been able to support as many businesses as we have. We're just through looking at our numbers and the intakes of new clients that have come in, we've supported roughly 5,000 businesses through direct advising, the webinars that businesses have been taking, our e-courses, some of our quick calls and emails, and just kind of that intake of clients coming in and out. So thank you all for the referrals that you all have sent into SBDC. We are capable, as you guys know, of supporting businesses in any industry at any stage of growth on up to 500 employees. So that's what SBA deems as small. So that's 99% of the businesses here in New Hampshire we are able to support. And we are doing the best we can to support as many of them as we possibly can. As I mentioned, some of the things that we tried to do and kind of implement through the pandemic, first and foremost was our COVID assistance page, trying to get all sorts of good information out to you all in terms of the federal programs, the state programs that are available to businesses, as well as some best practices that our advisors have shared and put into documents, and then highlighting, of course, the webinars that we started. You know, we realized very quickly that we were not going to be able to keep up with demand, by just doing our one-on-one advising. So that's why we launched our webinar series, and that just took off with thousands of individuals taking those courses. We're going to continue those over the next few weeks, definitely focusing more on kind of operating in the new normal that we're talking about, but also still looking at, you know, the PPP forgiveness and some of the logistics of how to manage those federal relief programs going forward to make sure that your businesses are doing what they need to do to protect themselves and, you know, dot the I's and cross the T's for all of the programs. So definitely stay tuned for more on that. Some really exciting news though, you know, we were able to expand our team. We received some CARES Act money in May that has allowed us to build capacity, not only on the program and the services side, but also on the staff side. So we started this year as a staff of 13. In a couple weeks, we will be a staff of 20. So you'll be seeing some new Seacoast area advisors coming on board too. So we're very excited to announce that. You'll see that in, again, 2 weeks, all of the new names, but we will definitely do, you will be hearing from Laura Daniel, our Seacoast Regional Director, with those introductions of some new team members. So like I said, very excited for those two folks in the Seacoast in particular, but again, some other statewide additions too. The team has come together tremendously. I could not have asked for a more coordinated response effort and kind of everybody leaning in to be able to support businesses and kind of come up with new ideas on how we can support our companies. So lots of good things on that front. You'll be seeing in an early fall-ish some new content that we're creating through working with some various subject matter experts out of UNH Paul College and the law school. So some great new e-courses are going to be coming online and a variety of other blogs and information that we'll be sharing. So great stuff for you guys to then to be able to share with the business community. You'll see some stuff on marketing and HR, supply chain, government contracting, exporting. The list is pretty long. So again, we're excited to be able to share that content with all of you in another couple months. But the reason that we're all here today is, of course, the resiliency survey that we were able to put together. And that, again, was funded through the CARES Act. And we were really excited to be able to create that survey in the first place. And pleased to be able to work with Sean Mckinley and, of course, A.D. Smith, who I'm sure you all know well from the UNH Survey Center. We decided to focus and put some resources toward a survey because we really wanted to better understand the challenges and needs of small businesses across the state so that we could then more effectively help them recover, reopen, and ultimately become more resilient. Whether it's the pandemic that we're dealing with now or looking at other ways that they need to be resilient. You know, God forbid there are floods like we had the Mother's Day floods, a decade ago, I guess, at this point, or more, but other natural disasters or things like that, we need to be prepared. And our communities and our businesses definitely need to come together to understand the best way to support each other. So with the survey, we were thrilled to work with 56 different economic development partners, of course, the Portsmouth Chamber and Nancy through the city, and a number of the other chambers throughout the Seacoast, and a lot of economic development offices kind of pitched in and helped us distribute the survey. So many of you probably got the survey a few times. So we apologize, but at the same time, we're so thankful that you responded, because not only did we, through the statewide survey, get 1,549 responses, you all in just the Seacoast community, I believe it was at 420 responses. That's tremendous. And Andy has told a number of people, Andy Smith, that this is the largest small business survey that the Survey Center has helped put together. And I think, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, that's happened at least this year alone in terms of surveying the business community. So really exciting information, and a good time for us to be able to get that information. So Sean's going to cover specifically the Seacoast report and providing that information. And, you know, I think even just looking at some of the comparisons, the state versus the Seacoast directly, but, you know, you guys saw that, I'm sure in the results of the statewide survey, you know, we knew the businesses were struggling, but what it helped us do was to quantify the problems. We saw that 3/4 of the businesses that responded saw a decline in revenue. 40% of the respondents had less employees than they did in February from the time that they responded. But some of the positive stuff that came out of it, it was very hopeful and exciting for me and for a lot of us to hear that there were some new innovations that were created, or partnerships between small businesses to help them respond to the pandemic and to keep them afloat and get them a little bit further on. So as discouraging as some of the news may have been in the data that came out of the survey, and what we're seeing and hearing anecdotally, the survey also tells a really hopeful story in my mind, and that's where I want us to be thinking, and how we can continue to support the businesses across the state and in our communities to continue to innovate and to partner with other businesses or economic development offices and their chambers to make sure that they're doing everything they possibly can to, you know, keep the doors open, keep their employees employed, and doing what they do best, run their small business, to further support some of the work that the communities and the businesses are going to be trying to do. We'll be launching a small business and community resiliency academy with UNH Cooperative Extension. The in-person academy we're hoping for will start in March of next year, but sometime in the fall, you'll start seeing us hosting some webinars, talking about it, hosting communities and economic development partners on one set of the webinars, and then businesses to talk again very specifically about resiliency. What does it mean to be a more resilient community and to support your businesses and your residents, but also businesses? What do you need to do to better protect yourself in the event of future challenges or future disasters or other things that come up? We want to make them, again, more resilient to be able to continue operating, but also the goal behind it being a small business and a community resiliency academy is to make sure that the two groups are coming together and really relying on each other and making sure that the other group knows what the needs and challenges are so that they can, again, together solve those issues. So we're very excited about that, and again, looking forward to working more with all of you on this call to make that a success and get your feedback in terms of what you guys would be looking for and what you all need. So that's my quick overview of kind of where we have been in the statewide survey, and I'm looking forward to hearing Sean's presentation on the Seacoast report. So
thank you, Liz.
I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was great. I just want to put in a plug also for the partnership that the City of Portsmouth has with the Small Business Development Center. We provide an office in City Hall for the free counseling services. You do have to register for them. Certainly, City Hall is not open to outside visitors at this point for that, but all of their counselors are meeting with their clients remotely, and we will continue to support that and the office once City Hall is open for those services. So I am excited for that, and I'm excited to hear what Sean is going to tell us. Valerie and I were talking about the statewide report, and we thought it would be useful for us to see a snapshot and just call out some of the data for our Seacoast businesses. So I'm glad that our audience was also interested in hearing that. And so what I'd like to do now is just do a quick introduction for Sean and quickly turn it over to him, because I think that's what we all want to hear. Sean Mckinley is Research Associate at UNH Survey Center, where he's worked for a little over 4 years. Received a BA with concentration in political science from Keene State College and master's degrees from UNH and Brandeis. In his survey center work, he regularly interfaces with New Hampshire businesses and participates in a collaboration with the New Hampshire BIA in researching and publishing consumer confidence numbers for the state. So take it away, Sean.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Nancy. So yeah, I'm Sean McKinley, work for UNH for the Survey Center. And we put together, as people have mentioned, a distinct report based on just Seacoast respondents. I think Liz was correct that there were about 420 of them overall. So what I'd like to do now is walk you through briefly that survey or that report that we did so that you can see what those results might be like for the Seacoast region. We begin just with a regular title slide, things like that, and you can have a table of contents that can help you navigate through if you are reading the full report. The key findings page describes a bit of the methodology about how all this worked, which you may or may not be interested in, and Liz touched on a little bit already. And it also has key findings on this page and on the following page. So you can, if you're looking for just a very high level idea about what's happened and what the report indicates, then you can see it just in the key findings if you want to get through it relatively quickly. So what I'm going to do is just take you through demographics real quick. You can see here where exactly all these businesses are located in the Seacoast region. You can see a lot of them are concentrated in the relatively larger cities that we have in the eastern part of the region. And we also have descriptions about their people's relationship with the SBDC here in Figure 3. You can also see whether these businesses consider themselves to be family businesses and what generation that they are. We also ask people about the type of industry. And these charts are all just restricting the results to these Seacoast businesses that responded. The overall results are in the main report, which, as we mentioned, is a distinct thing. So normally here you'll see in these charts a little title, extra title, just denoting that, just to be clear about what we're reporting on. And as you can see here, there's textual analysis with all of this that just explains each one of these charts and what it's saying. Obviously, I'm not going to go through and read it word by word, but that can help you if you're reading the full report. We also ask people about which of the partners people are currently affiliated with. As you can see, and as Liz mentioned, it's a very long list of people that we partnered with for the survey, and people could indicate which of these groups that they have some kind of affiliation with. One of the things we asked about people about was whether their business was deemed to be essential or non-essential, and in general, whether they remained open during the emergency order, number 17, issued by Governor Sununu. And you can see here that Seacoast businesses, just over half of them were considered essential, and that's slightly higher than the other regions. You can see in Figure 8B, reports are, charts like this one that show by region towards the end in the title. A lot of them try to compare the results from the Seacoast to the other 4 regions that we typically use at UNH, Hillsborough County, Central and Lakes Region, Western New Hampshire, and Northern New Hampshire. So this way you can see the results overall for the Seacoast and how people responded there. But then you can also see whether that differs meaningfully from the other regions. And as you can see here, it doesn't differ all that much from almost any of the other regions except Northern New Hampshire, where that region, fewer of the businesses were deemed essential. In Figure 8C here, again, you can see that this is a different type of chart. And when you see this denotation that says by select demographics, these charts show differences within groups. And again, this is just within Seacoast respondents. And these charts only show groups that are deviating from the mean by a significant amount. And usually, in this case, what we use for a significant difference is 10% plus or minus the overall. So you can see that the essential, the number that said they were essential is 51%. And you can see that down here in this white bar as well. And anything in the blue above it these groups were more likely to say that their business was deemed essential, and the red below, they're more likely to say their business was not deemed essential. And you can see the title explains that. Charts like this exist throughout the report where necessary. These are only included when the groups are large enough for us to be able to speak with any degree of confidence about how they answered. So obviously, if there's a group of only 3 people, no matter how much they deviate from the mean, that group won't appear here because we don't really want to extrapolate a lot about that group based on the response of 3 people. So this requires at least 50 people to have been in the group at all for it to qualify, and like I said, for it to be 10% above or below the mean. Getting back to just a little bit of the substance, we asked people if they stayed open, if they were deemed essential, or whether they chose to close. As you can see, most businesses that were allowed to stay open under the emergency order did so. The small number that didn't and decided to close on their own, most often they cited health and safety concerns and reduced sales, understandably. A couple other people mentioned employees being unwilling or unable to work or other reasons. And then here you can see a chart that just shows the 3 different outcomes that people could have had for their business during the emergency order. We also asked about the number of employees people have, bearing in mind that there's some amount of seasonal variability. We asked people about the employees that they had in mid-February, which we determined to be a time previous to the onset of the pandemic, and then in mid to late June when people were filling out the survey. And you can see the differences here among Seacoast businesses, that the average business said that they had about 15 employees in February and only about 11 in mid to late June. And you can see that a lot of the losses were in part-time people and with some also in their full-time employees. Down here, you can see the number of employees that people have grouped over time. And you can see a lot more of a move towards people saying that their business has 0 to 1 employees. We're not really sure the 0 to 1, whether that's someone saying, I am the only business ourselves. But the crux of the matter is there's a fair amount of businesses now that say that they employ very few or no people whatsoever. And you can see here, again, one of the region charts. Seacoast businesses relative to other ones tend to be a little bit smaller. The ones that responded to the survey, Hillsborough County and Western New Hampshire businesses tend to be a little bit bigger. And here you can see the change from February to June. And you can see that about almost half have fewer employees than they did in February among Seacoast businesses. But on the other hand, also 43% said that they have the same number, and 11% actually had more. And here again, you can see there aren't huge differences between regions. Seacoast businesses were slightly more likely than Central Lakes and Western New Hampshire businesses to say that they have fewer employees, a little bit less than Northern New Hampshire. So there aren't huge differences here, but it is showing that Seacoast businesses, relatively speaking, are just very, very slightly more likely to have fewer employees than they did before the onset of the pandemic. We also asked, as you would imagine, about finances, this getting to the crux of the matter really about how the pandemic has affected people and their businesses. And you can see that much like on the statewide level, a lot of Seacoast businesses report a very, very significant effect on their bottom line. You can see that more than half of Seacoast businesses say that their monthly revenues decline by 50% or more, and 85% have had their revenue decline. So this is really, as Liz was saying, this is quantifying what I think a lot of us suspected, that businesses are really suffering as a result of this. Here you can see that problem is in fact widespread among the community, business community in the Seacoast. 11% said that their revenue stayed the same, and 4% say it actually increased. Here again, you can see that the Seacoast is not differing in a huge way from the rest of the state, a little bit less likely to have lost revenue than Northern New Hampshire, but more than Central or Lakes region, but about on par with Hillsborough County. So we're not seeing huge differences there between regions. And here again, you can see the select demographics chart, and understandably so, you can see that businesses, for instance, that were closed as non-essential, and ones with very few employees, and ones who are not confident about their own operation or about the economy, they're more likely to say that their businesses' revenue is declined by 50% or more. And then businesses that remained open, ones with larger numbers of employees, people are confident that they'll be operating, those businesses were less likely to say that they lost that much revenue. And digging a little bit deeper into people's finances, we talked about accounts receivable here, and you can see about half of businesses say their accounts receivable is slower. And on page 12, you can see that about 3 in 8 say that at least some of their of their payments to vendors they've had to defer or modify. But these actually aren't, relatively speaking, we don't think these are too bad. We're only seeing about a quarter of these people said that only some, and only like 14% are saying most or nearly all of their payments to vendors have been deferred or modified as a result of this. And again, we can see up here with the accounts receivable, Seacoast is a little bit on maybe on the higher edge, certainly more than Central Lakes, but not demonstrably different from other businesses in other parts of the country, or parts of the state, excuse me. Here again, you can see differences between the different types of businesses in the Seacoast. And understandably, based on industry, you're seeing some differences. So healthcare and social assistance industries, those are far, far more likely than overall to have said that they have slower accounts receivable. Accommodation and food services, less likely to have indicated that that's the case. We also asked more specifically about how exactly the pandemic has affected their finances, understanding that the people who've lost money, how exactly has that happened? And the most straightforward answer, clearly being the most common one here, 2/3 of people say a decline in sales, which makes sense, obviously, that might happen during the pandemic. But people are also citing other things that don't immediately spring to mind, perhaps. Things like reduced hours of operation, being required to close in general, supply chain interruptions, employees being unable to work remotely, choosing to close, being unable to get a sufficient workforce, things like that. Relatively small numbers of people, but these are still not insignificant amounts of businesses are reporting that these things, in addition to the more typical we might expect decline in sales, that these things as well have caused them to experience financial losses. And here you can see charts like these when there's charts like on the previous page, on page 13, where these charts have a lot of different options all in one chart. You can see them broken out in charts that look like this by different regions for each one. And you can see here that the Seacoast is more likely than all the other regions, only very slightly, but more than the rest, to cite decline in sales. And they were actually also more likely than other regions to say that being unable to get a sufficient workforce to maintain operations affected their finances. And bear in mind, looking at the numbers here, these numbers, the differences between regions are very small. They're not real big ones, and if we were putting them in a normal demographic chart, they probably wouldn't show up. But we wanted to make sure that you could see these differences or lack thereof between them. So you can peruse this a little bit more if you like, and see that, yeah, there are some differences, like I said, but they're very small. Here you can see, I won't get into these too much because it's probably a little bit too much detail, but again, more of these select demographics charts showing which type of businesses were more likely to cite all of these things as things that caused them to experience financial losses. Then we also asked people about what kind of impacts that each of these had on their finances, just to try to gauge, okay, you might say that you had a supply chain interruption, but how important was that? How impactful was that on your business's finances? And again, this buttresses what we saw in the previous question, that a decline in sales is by far and away the most important thing, understandably so, in affecting businesses' finances. We're also seeing reduced hours of operation. About half of people said that that was one of the top 3 most important things that have affected their business's finances, and being required to close as well. And a quarter of people actually said that that was the most important thing to affect them. So there's a little bit more nuance here from this question that we can learn a little more about those factors that affect people's finances. We asked about relief programs and what businesses were utilizing to try to help them here. We split them between the federal, and then on the following page we have municipal, state, and private. The federal programs, the payroll protection program, is used by almost 2/3 of Seacoast businesses. And then we have about 1/3 use the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance, or the EIDL loan. And you can see down here actually that, again, the Seacoast, again, while it's very marginal, they're more likely to have used the payroll protection program or the EIDL advance than businesses in any other region. Very slight, but those are pretty high numbers for Seacoast businesses utilizing these programs, certainly more than, as you can see, with Central or Lakes region businesses here. And then you can see, again, the demographics as well. And as I mentioned, the state, municipal, and private relief programs, the Main Street Relief Fund is used by 40% of Seacoast people, and we also had about 1/4 used unemployment for their employees or for themselves. And you can see down here, Seacoast businesses are pretty middling in their usage of these types of funds. And northern New Hampshire regions actually relied on them a lot more than in businesses in any other region of the state. We asked about resiliency, as you would expect, it being kind of the title of the survey. And one of the findings that we really noted in the statewide survey, which is also true in this one, is that only 18% of businesses said that they had a resiliency or continuity plan before the pandemic started. Almost 3/4 said that they didn't. The Seacoast, you can see here, is pretty normal in that respect. It's slightly higher than Western New Hampshire, slightly lower than Northern and Hillsborough, but Seacoast businesses don't really differ from businesses in the state, and that very few of them, only about 1 in 5 to 1 in 6, say that they actually had one. Oops, excuse me. And among the few people who did, we asked about what things were in said plan, and people mentioned things like a list of potential threats to business operations. There was a little over half. Employees being trained to implement the plan, communications, but there's really no clear set of criteria that everyone who did have a plan actually included in their plan before the pandemic started. And we asked people how they managed their workforce as a result of the pandemic. This is kind of a broad range of things that people could have done, including buying PPE for their employees. About half of Seacoast businesses have done that. Maintained or brought back employees under the payroll protection program, or 43% did that. And you can see less than a third did some of these other things, like personally working without a salary or reducing employee hours, laying off or furloughing employees, providing health and safety training for employees. So you can see that here. And the Seacoast, again, here's another of these charts comparing the regions. The Seacoast actually here, again, the differences are relatively marginal. But you can see that Seacoast businesses are more likely to have done a fair number of these things, like purchasing PPE, maintaining employees under the payroll protection program, health and safety training, changing the layout of their business, reducing employee hours. That the Seacoast businesses, a lot of these are things that you could frame in kind of supporting employees. Seacoast businesses actually did more than businesses in any other region of the state. Again, differences being marginal, but the results are as they are right there. So you can see how these differences manifest across different regions. And here we ask people about working remotely as one of these strategies that people might be employing. The vast majority of businesses are not having employees working remotely at the moment, or in June when they responded to this survey, about more than 3/4 said that 0% of their employees were, but 5% of businesses said everyone was working remotely. The Seacoast, again, pretty middling here, more than Northern New Hampshire, less than Hillsborough, but pretty much in the middle in terms of other regions for working remotely. And we asked people about innovations or modifications that they've made at their business. And this is one of the things that we talked about earlier that really was interesting and really surprised us when the results came out about, not really about this as much, but, and I'll show you this later, about what people are planning to do in regards to these. So some of these things people are doing have employees working from home. 32% of people said that they did at some point have that being the case. Making physical changes to their location is 32%, offering new products for employees, 31%. And you're even seeing relatively large numbers of people, for the people who this would apply to, doing things like curbside delivery, collaborating with other businesses, home delivery, e-commerce, takeout. That a lot of people have taken up a lot of these strategies as a result of the pandemic to try to buttress their business. And here again, you can see the comparisons with the regions. And once again, the Seacoast businesses tend to be kind of leading the way with a fair amount of these things. Employees working from home, they're tied for the highest. Offering new products or services, curbside delivery, home delivery. Seacoast businesses are at the top, again, with the differences being pretty marginal. And then we asked about something that people have done that has been successful. This was an open-ended question, trying to get people to give us a little bit more detail about something that they've done that's worked well. And a fair amount of people mentioned things like implementing remote or virtual work, or changing how they deliver or produce products or services. But some things that jumped out from here that we hadn't expected and we didn't really include in other parts of the survey. One of those things was people mentioned that they practice better external communication or advertising. So these people tended to say that they had two reasons that I saw in their responses for doing this. Some people mentioned both, in fact, that they said that on the one hand, necessity is the mother of invention, that they absolutely needed to maximize the amount of exposure they could get for their business. And two, some people mentioned that they had time, either because of the shutdown or because of a slowdown in business. They had time to sit down and fixate on how they could maximize their external communication or advertising. Some other things that people mentioned that we hadn't really thought about were being adaptive, flexible, or calm. A couple other people mentioned, again, thinking of collaboration. Some people said that they had improved internal collaboration. So some people mentioned that they had better meetings than they had in the past, or people mentioned that their staff meetings over Zoom had gone really well. So that was another thing that, again, relatively few numbers of people, but something that we hadn't really expected, that are benefits to people's businesses that might not have come about without this pandemic, that are interesting things that we just hadn't really foreseen. The recovery section, this is a very intimidating graph. I know we're trying to include really a whole list of things about that people can be concerned about as their business recovers. And as you might expect, the things that are getting the most concern from Seacoast businesses are very tangible things, notably maintaining sales or revenue and maintaining customers. So we're seeing large numbers, more than 80% of people say that they're concerned about these things. But we're also seeing things like timely payment of bills and access to capital. Again, very tangible things that people are concerned about. People are somewhat less concerned about things like cybersecurity, delayed hiring of employees, access to COVID-19 testing, and defaulting on existing loans and working remotely. So there's a fair amount of variation here, where you're seeing about a third of people worried about things like this, and up here we're seeing more than 4 in 5 worried about these things. And here again, you can see the differences between regions, and you see that the Seacoast businesses, they tend to lead the way in things like timely payment of bills. And on this page as well, you can see more of them. You can also see that the Seacoast people are close to the top in things like defaulting on existing loans. But relatively speaking, Seacoast businesses don't indicate that they're quite as concerned, as you can see here, really more than any other region. A lot of these, the Seacoast is third or somewhere in there in the region. So it's pretty well matching what we're seeing statewide in terms of concern, with some exception to things like timely payment of bills, which is a little bit higher than some other regions. And again, you can see the differences between demographics within the Seacoast here. And then we had a section about going forward, about what we can do or what businesses need going forward. And again, here we're seeing renewed access to customers leading the way, a very tangible thing, as well as financial assistance, also very tangible needs that people have. But we're also seeing that health and safety guidance, large numbers of people say that that's going to be very or somewhat important to their business, and also resiliency planning. And if you recall, we saw this on the statewide level as well. Only about 18% of people had a resiliency plan before all this started. But now we're seeing that almost 3/4 of them say that resiliency planning is going to be very or somewhat important. So obviously that was a very interesting finding. And then we're seeing some other things like regulatory relief and training, cybersecurity. Those are popping up as well. And these are still getting more than half of people say that they're going to be very or somewhat important to their business. So these are some interesting things to look into as the business community recovers. And again, you can see that the Seacoast has attaches greater importance to renewed access to customers, health and safety guidance, regulatory relief, things like that than other regions, but they're less concerned about cybersecurity. And then this is connecting to what I mentioned before about these innovations and modifications that people made. The really interesting finding that we had from this, and as Liz mentioned, I think a hopeful finding, is that all these innovations that people have made, you can see the number of people who have done each one of them here. The vast majority of people, and for a lot of these things, say that they're going to keep doing these things after the pandemic is over. So e-commerce, for instance, 92% of people who didn't do that before and now are doing it, they're going to keep doing it, which I suppose that's probably somewhat understandable. But even things like offering new products or services, most people who are doing that are also going to continue doing that when they're done and collaborating with other businesses. Even things like takeout, home delivery, curbside delivery, and even employees working from home. We're seeing 6 in 10 of people doing that now or more, that they plan to keep doing these things after the pandemic's over. So that's a really interesting finding, we thought. And then we asked about how confident people are about their business operating in the future. And you can see here that in the near term, in 1 month and 3 months, we're seeing most people are very or somewhat confident that their business will still be operating in that time frame. When you get to 6 and 12 months, we're seeing a small amount of people starting to say that they're not very or not at all confident about their business's survival in that time frame. So about 1 in 6 here in 12 months and just a little lower in 6 months. So that's also somewhat interesting to bear in mind. And you can see the lower amounts of people saying that they're very confident in that fact. And here you can see that the Seacoast is a little bit lower probably than some other areas, especially Hillsborough County, but they're a little bit higher in their confidence than northern New Hampshire. And you can see that within Seacoast businesses, ones that had a resiliency plan, healthcare and social assistance businesses, and ones who are confident in the economy, they're pretty confident that they will recover as well and they'll continue operating. And people who are not very confident in the economy, perhaps understandably, aren't as confident that they'll still be operating. And these groups hint at this question on the bottom of the page, where in addition to asking about whether you'll be operating and how confident that will be the case, we ask businesses how confident they are about the New Hampshire economy and how confident they are that it will be recovered to pre-COVID-19 levels within these timeframes. And you can see here that most businesses are not very confident, they're not very optimistic about a quick turnaround within 3 months. You can see that less than a quarter of people are confident that will happen. But then we're seeing increasing numbers believe that will happen in 6 months, and a majority say that that's going to happen within 12 months. But even in that time frame, we're seeing about a third of people say that they're not very or not at all confident that the state economy will have recovered to pre-COVID-19 levels by that point. So that's another interesting finding. And again, you can see there are differences between regions here. Seacoast businesses are maybe slightly more positive than the state as a whole, but it's pretty close, a little less than Hillsborough County. So that's the main body of the report. There's also, as you can see here, this is the appendix where you can just look at every single response broken down by all of these demographics, but obviously I'm not going to get into that. So that's the main thrust of the report. If you have any questions or have had any as I've been going through the report, I'll endeavor to answer them as best I can whenever we're doing that in the program. So with that, I will hand it back over.
Thank you, Sean. That was a lot of information in a short period of time. And I'm sure everyone in the audience is saying, how do I get my hands on that report? And let's talk with the chamber right now. I will be sure that we have it up on the city's website. The chamber, what are you folks thinking? Or should we email it to everybody that registered? We're
happy to make it available in any way people want it. So if that's thanks to the city, Nancy was able to get the funding from the City of Portsmouth to be able to purchase this parsed out survey specifically for the Seacoast. So thank you very much for that, Nancy. And if you're okay with us sharing it, we'll do it whatever way people want. So I guess maybe we can put it up on, Ben, can we put it up on our website as well?
Yeah, give me 2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right, there you go. Thank you.
And if folks want to compare the Seacoast report to the statewide report, SBDC has the state report, the abridged version. We can also share with, if anybody's interested in the 233-page full report. Might be a touch too long for some folks, but happy to share. So please let me know.
Yeah, and I've downloaded the summary one, Liz, which I have found really helpful as well. And that's you can get that right from your page, your website, right? We can just find that link from the SBDC website. So maybe Ben, we can go and find that and put that up with as well at some point in another 2 minutes, maybe 3. Thanks.
I don't know if people have had a chance to ask questions, but and how much time, Valerie, we have for that. But
we still have a few minutes, Nancy. If you Ben, do we have questions coming in?
Yes, we do. Give me 1 second here. So, a question coming in about how confident should we be in some of these numbers, given that we have 12,000 people coming for a car race and bike week and schools and sports reopening and a lot of factors to come, and what is the potential impact that these numbers could shift dramatically based on the pandemic numbers, I guess?
I could take a stab at answering that one, if you don't mind. I think, we have to remember this is a snapshot in time. The survey asked these questions between January 10th and January 24th. So that was when we were asking the questions. And also you have to remember that a lot of the federal programs had been announced, but the Main Street programs, and specifically the SELF program coming out of the state, that hadn't even been launched yet. So there were probably other businesses that were taking advantage of programs. So yes, there's a likelihood that there is going to be a shift. Hard to tell what is going to happen, but what I can say is that SBDC has set aside additional funding to do a second round of surveying. And our plan is to do that in February. So that'll be in 9 months, we'll do another snapshot. And then, although I haven't talked to Sean and Andy about this yet, I would imagine that they would also be able to kind of parse out the Seacoast responses for you all again in kind of a mini report and a follow-on. So it'll be interesting to see how we can compare what the responses were in June to what will be February.
Great. Another question that came through was for Sean. Sean, could you maybe pick one or two of the most interesting findings you thought you found in this report?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, kind of in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. I think what we noticed really more than anything else was that distinction between the resiliency, the people who had it beforehand and the people who think it'll be important going forward. I think that was a really interesting finding. Probably the being able to quantify people's loss in revenue, I think, was really helpful, because as Liz and I had mentioned, it's something I think we all kind of knew was likely, but it's really helpful to be able to say more concretely, and breaking it out the way we did, to be able to say, okay, how much have you lost in revenue, rather than just yes or no, I've lost revenue. So I think those are really interesting. And in addition, as I mentioned, the thing about the modifications and innovations people have made, and the fact that most people who have done those things plan on doing them in the future. So that's something I think that's really interesting as a result of this. We don't really know when hopefully things go back to normal. Are a lot of businesses going to just look a lot different in a positive way? I think that's something that we hadn't really thought would be such an interesting takeaway from this, but really those numbers ended up being really high, and I was interested that was the case.
And to kind of add on to what Sean was saying, I think there are also some of the tidbits in terms of the Seacoast versus other parts of the state who made the transition to e-commerce. And I think that was actually one of the areas where the Seacoast didn't end up on top, in terms of this was one of the innovations that they did, which means maybe that's an opportunity for us to work with the Seacoast chambers and partners there to provide more e-commerce specific webinars and information to your folks to help them make that transition. So we can also pinpoint what wasn't in place and what we all see as an important direction for them to go. One area where I think we're also going to be doing some work is around cybersecurity. I think with everything going on in the world right now, that has taken a little bit of a back seat in terms of a focus and concern, but we need to make sure that that stays or becomes a higher priority going forward. So we need to, again, reopen, do some recovery, but as part of the resiliency planning, that needs to be a bigger piece of it. So again, that is one of the topics that you'll see coming out of our SME or subject matter expert content development. So you'll see some blogs and some e-courses and some webinars focused on that topic in particular. But that's another area, again, that I think we need to be making sure that we're watching what businesses are paying attention to and what they aren't paying attention to, and then making sure that we are helping to present information in a methodical and kind of timely way to help them, again, recover and become more resilient. We can't give them everything right now, and we wouldn't want to. It doesn't make sense. It's still summer. We've got a month until school starts. People need a little bit of breathing room. So we have been cautiously developing our plan for content and distribution of it, to be mindful of where people are. And everybody, I think, needs a little bit of that break and a breather. but we'll be going and doing much more. We're putting out a lot more content and heavier webinar schedule come September again.
So it sounds like there's no more questions, which brings us right to the very end of the meeting. I want to say though, Liz, following up on that question about what struck me when I read the report and looked at the data is an understanding that most of the businesses that took this survey are small, 20 employees or less. But I found that it was really exciting that many of them had started new product development and delivery and also more e-commerce. But it was really striking to me that they also didn't think that cybersecurity was important. Those two things are so linked to me. Either they have great cybersecurity already, so we need to interpret some of this stuff. But I'm looking forward to the programs that are developed because I think it's really going to help us, our businesses, be successful through this time. So, Valerie, do you want to wrap up?
I will wrap up. Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you for co-hosting with me. Thank you for making these survey results possible. Liz and Sean, we know that you've carved out a significant amount of time for us, and we really appreciate that time and everything that you shared with us. It's extraordinary. It'll take me a little while longer to get through just the first 45 pages. It'll take me a little longer for that, but it's great information, and thank you. I was remiss in not acknowledging that our chamber board chair is with us, Dan Ennis. Thank you, Dan, for being with us. As you know, he's a professor over at UNH, so he's a numbers guy. He gets all this stuff. So Dan, maybe you can help me get through these 45 pages. I do want to say very quickly that, we do an annual fundraiser called Street Life. And it might be a little bit different this year, but I want people to stay tuned because I think we have some great news that we're going to share with you fairly soon. So stay tuned on that one. I want to tell you that we've revised our schedule for Chamber Chat Live. We were doing it every single Friday. We're now doing it on the 2nd and 4th Fridays of the month. Adjusted this month because of the holiday. So on August 14th, we will be having another Chamber Chat Live. We have some ideas about who we want to bring on to that, but we really want to hear from you folks about who you want to hear from. What issues do you want us to address? And is there anybody in particular you want to speak with that we can reach out to? We're very, very lucky that people like Liz and Sean join us. So let me know who you want to hear from. On August 28th, somebody you really do want to hear from is Steve Zadrovic, who's the superintendent of schools in Portsmouth. And there might be some questions about school, going back to school, that are on many people's minds. So Steve has agreed to join us. I think we have a couple other people, probably somebody from Great Bay Community College as well. So join us on August 28th for that. Resources for information, we always remind you, portsmouthcollaborative.org/COVID-19. Follow the Chamber Collaborative on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, because Jen is a social media crazy person who puts all that stuff out for us. We are so thankful for that, Jen. And Ben puts it all up on the website. So we always have some new information for you. The City of Portsmouth City Manager Advisory is now called the Portsmouth Reopening Newsletter, published on Mondays and Thursdays with all the city info you care to get. And on Sunday, you can see another amazing poem by Poet Laureate Tammy Truex. I really enjoy those. Remember to be kind, wash your hands, wear a mask, safe distance, and stay well out there. Now, we always try to give you something fun and funny and a little giggle when we walk away from this on Friday afternoons, because we all need that on Friday afternoons. So I think that Ben has something loaded up for us. I know that I was giggling watching this. This couple absolutely cracks me up. So take a look, enjoy your weekend. See you on the 14th.
Each day is more like a creepy dream from a movie scene. All day at home with my family, can't see anyone. Put on pants, get the mail, turn around. Maybe go on a run. see a friend dive away on the ground. I never shower in quarantine, it's bad hygiene. And now I've taken up gardening. Who have I become? Put on pants, get the mail, turn around. The people getting restless, and now just on the news, they've canceled all the rest of school. And we've run out of puzzles and new shows to stream. But we got nothing left to do, but we gotta make it through. Hey, the quarantine is not quite over. What if I can go out and see everyone until 2021? I can't see anyone until 2021. For 40 days and for 40 nights, we've been in this room, and we can't stand the same meal plan. Chicken again, on the edge, on the verge, breaking down. Yeah, we've given up most nights and just microwave these bagel bites. Bagel bites! Bagel bites! Woo-hoo! We used to be better parents, so 2 months ago they show us homework and we would help, we would try hard. Now we give up and go watch Die Hard. They're too young. Everybody tells me, be careful what you do. Don't go around breaking all the rules. Hey, and I know that it's important, and we gotta stay at home. But I'm feeling so alone. I'm like a dog without a bone. Hey, the quarantine is not quite over. When can I go back out and see everyone? Will it be 2021? Hey! Hey! Hey!
God, it's just I get dizzy afterwards. Sorry. Spin it around.
Oh my gosh, they just cracked me up. Thank you everybody for joining us. Walk away with a giggle. Go hug somebody. Bye.